Our second speaker of the morning is Professor Donald Whitcomb, who is an archaeologist at the Oriental Institute of the University of Chicago, specialized in Islamic archaeology and particularly urban planning of the early Islamic city. And I should say, by way of continuity, that Professor Whitcomb has written some very important and extremely interesting essays hypothesizing about the legacy of South Arabian urbanism to Umayyad city planning. He has directed excavations at Qasr al-Qadim, Aqaba, Hadar Kanisrin, and most recently, Khirbet al-Mafjar, and he'll be talking to us today on those excavations. The title of his paper is Khirbet al-Mafjar, or Qasr Hisham, Changing Perceptions of a Palestinian Monument.
Thank you very much, Barry. One of the earliest discovered and most highly decorated of the early Islamic Qasr was Khirbet al-Mafjar, located just north of Jericho, a site which perhaps needs no introduction here. The site was excavated by Dmitry Baramki for 13 seasons between 1933 and 1948. He revealed a palace, mosque, pavilion, and bath with its large audience hall, as you can see. The palace, bath, mosque, and the pavilion building just in the front here. Also, as we have it, he also found the south gate leading toward Jericho. Understanding the Qasr is essentially an archaeological problem, as these places rarely have a name or reference in literature or historical documentation. Their discovery has been accidental and continuous. Back this way. Baramki had only 2 or 3 comparanda in the 1930s, while Denis Jenikand, in his recent dissertation, can count some 38 of these foundations, many of his own discoveries. Baramki, in his writings, described the periods of occupation as Umayyad and Abbasid, with later medieval reoccupation. The foundation was associated with Hisham ibn Abd al-Malik, based on an ostracon. A similar ostracon, also with Hisham's name, and the stucco decoration at Qasr al-Gharbi, seems to confirm this association with Hisham. Qasr Hisham is the preferred designation for this historical monument in Palestine, especially in contrast to the rather poetic interpretations by Robert Hamilton in favor of Walid ibn Yazid. Hamilton's articles and his book, written over his long lifespan, every 20 years approximately, states with growing certainty this thesis of Walid's foundation to the extent that it now dominates our understanding of this monument. More than countering these stories, renewed research of these archaeological remains is a search for broader context of Islamic occupation for the Qasr and the cities of Bilad Sham. I hesitate to talk about this because I spoke about 10 months ago at Bard College on this subject, but I have some information of our later excavations this last year. However, during the first campaign in 2011, our project Our project was lucky enough to excavate a new north gate, and the gate is precisely parallel to the south gate leading toward Jericho, excavated by Baramki. Here you have the gate itself, 2 towers with a guard's room, the street, most of the pavers are gone, fallen stones of the arch, and 2 benches before the gate, we have iron plating from the gate itself, and upon the bench was a scratched game played by those waiting to enter into the complex. This new gate provides a unifying feature for the palatial complex. The Garden Pavilion in this becomes the central feature of a manzara, or belvedere. If one can imagine this long portico, sitting under this portico in this garden, looking eastward to lower fields, and in the distance the Jordan River, with the backdrop of the Jordanian highlands forming this view. This is an understanding which Baramki wrote in his dissertation in 1953. In 1894, Bliss described 3 mounds at Mafjar. One donut-shaped to the south, which is the palace complex, a high mound in the center, which is the massive ruins of the bath and its audience hall, and another to the north. It was not until the 1960s that Auni Dajani directed attention to this area. Unfortunately, his extensive digging as director of the Jordanian Department of Antiquities was never reported, and all artifacts appear to be lost. Apparently, he assumed that this northern area was a workers' village or perhaps a caravanserai. And here you can see the remains of his excavations. In 2011, a new project under the Department of Antiquities of the Palestinian Authority and the University of Chicago, with Hamdan Taha, the director, and myself as co-directors, found a new project which found this gate and then worked in this northern area. We first had to draw a careful plan of the extant ruins, starting to phase the walls and pay attention to the bulks, the remaining soil. Whoops, excuse me, wrong button. So here we have the walls, which we have phased, and the white lines are the bulks, the soil, which is, and here you have the soil, and you have these very fine remains, foundations, on the bedrock, or actually clay, of the first building, what we called the Red Building. This had very fine stonework and seems to be a large residence, perhaps even an early palace of an Umayyad date. Last year, further excavations found a contemporary building to the southwest, and this turns out to be a large grape press with white mosaic floors of, again, the Umayyad date. Similar wine presses have been found throughout central Israel, including this one from Mishmar HaEmek, just here. Very similar in structure, somewhat smaller, but having the crushing floor here, a settling pit, and then 2 vats, just as we reconstruct here at Mafjar. Likewise, this last season, we were able to excavate clean first and then excavate an Abbasid house. It's this structure right here. And we were able to find a large yard here with a covered portion and a colonnade here, and then a central room, serving rooms behind, and a series of rooms to the south, with an entry vestibule with paving stones as well. This building is Abbasid due to the ceramics which we found in place, but also spolia, which we found, first of all, the paving of the large hall are stones taken from possibly our gate area or the pavilion. Likewise, we found in one of the rooms was a toilet, and the toilet was made of pieces of the balustrade from the pavilion as well. So we have spolia used from in the Abbasid period. The house is comparable to Abbasid houses in Raqqa, as you can see, a very similar house found at Raqqa. This next season, we intend to excavate a structure in the center of this yellow structure, which seems to be a stables for horses. Whoops, excuse me. These elements, the house and the stables together, strongly recalls the elements of a villa rustica. Perhaps best known is that of Ramat Hanadiv near Caesarea, dated to the 6th century. And here you have a reconstruction, the stables and the house together. And here, my reconstruction, taking the two elements apart, we have very similar houses and very similar stables together. This connection may also be seen at the site of Sanabra, perhaps the earliest of the Qasr in this region. And what you have here, we have the palace and palace. These are at the same scale, same orientation, and then a bath, and to the north we have this. The northern area, this dar, as I described it, if you turn it on its side, you have again the house and the stables. And this is dated, of course, to the Umayyad period. Finally, if we look at this combination of palace, baths, and then residential areas, one can see an interesting phenomenon with a parallel to the site of Qasr Hisham near Palmyra. Denis Jenikant has excavated a number of residences in this so-called northern area and has a detailed discussion of the various agricultural and animal production which may have supported this Qasr, the Qasr in general. Like our efforts at Mafjar, he seeks to find a pattern of organization of an agricultural estate, which no doubt has existed for all of these Qasr in Arabia and probably maybe extended to the Hijaz in an earlier period. The landed estates of the Umayyads, the Dia, were development first in the Hijaz, and the earliest Islamic elites all seem to have been very enthusiastic builder of such estates. Thence, throughout the regions of Bilad al-Sham and even further, one can find such estates as a major activity in the Umayyad period and continuing into the Abbasid. While many aspects of this phenomenon remain to be discussed, this agricultural estate provides a model for the economic underpinning of Qasr Hisham. And I'd like to say that it seems to me this association with Arabia and strikes to mind the hypothesis, the wonderful article of Priscilla Suchek, who applies this association of Qasr Hisham with Suleiman ibn Abd al-Malik. I'm hoping that our early residence, perhaps a palace, might be that she hypothesized to the north, and that we may find evidence for this association. Finally, our field work in Jericho this last winter produced rain, which produced many birds, especially the hoopoe. When we recall in the Quran, the hoopoe says to Solomon, "And I come unto thee from Sheba with sure tidings, Likewise, I would hope that migration of ideas from Arabia into Syria will reveal new dimensions to the mystery of these foundations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, we have time for some questions, but I would ask those asking questions to move to the microphones, please, so they can be heard.
I have a question about horses.
Yes.
Thinking of the climate in Jericho, wouldn't you think that their presence there would be likely to be seasonal?
Exactly. I strongly believe that, indeed, I worried about horses as well. We excavate in January, February, where my students from Chicago complain if the weather is under 70 degrees. It is ideal. You saw the scene with the foliage. Indeed, the oasis of Jericho is quite wonderful in this time period. I think that it's very possible that this was for horse breeding in this period. Likewise, my hypothesis again is that the hair might in fact be associated with raising the horses or perhaps even racing them.
May I ask you a question? Can I push you a little bit on the question of the date, which you alluded to, and the patron? Sorry, the question is the question of dating and patron, because we move between Hisham, Suleiman. Are you suggesting a kind of a multi-period occupancy, or what?
First of all, we are debating between Suleiman and Hisham and Walid. We're talking about less than, 40 years? Which is tough archaeologically. We usually can't pin things down to the century, let alone the 25 years or so. But as far as this is really going to be very tricky to sort out who is precisely the ruler founding it and occupying it as well. It could be several of them, and I'm not discounting Walid, although I doubt whether he had the finances to do this wonderful building. It is clear that the occupation continues into the Abbasid period, and not just with spolia, but indeed unreported by Hamilton, but very clear in the Mandate period records in the Rockefeller Museum, ample pictures and descriptions of buildings being reused and continuing into the Abbasid period. Likewise, there seem to be changes in the palace itself, which may be Abbasid as well, which we're going to be investigating. And further, there is a reoccupation in the Ayyubid Mamluk. Seems to be concentrated in the palace, although we have a few stray sherds in the northern area.
Thank you. Time for one more question, two more questions.
I'll be really quick. I just wonder, do you think that the people who were living in that northern section were, in the Umayyad period, simply workers and people connected to the functioning of the sort of agrarian business at hand, or what do you think?
I think that we have to sort out the different phases. The earliest building is not a workers' area. The architecture is too fine. Whatever was originally intended was something fairly formal. Whoever ended up living there and working the estates, probably because of the gate, had to have access into the official quarters as well, so that we're talking about an ancillary estate, but probably one where fairly important officials might have lived as well. I think that up until now we've been clearing the older excavations. This next season we hope to work in parts of this original building where we'll have stratification and occupation undisturbed by the Jordanian excavations. We'll see. Mr. Robert?
Just very briefly, I'm fascinated with the possibility of horse breeding there. Can we tell from the size of the stables how many horses might have been involved?
Not yet. I think that it's fairly sizable, and there are a surprising number of parallels, Pella and other places where stables have been found of similar date, and of course later, Atlit being one too.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.